Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Coffee with Katie. I have my Winter Night Trilogy mug and my Witcher tank top because it's fantastic. And it's kind of hot outside today. So today's video is going to be my May reading wrap up. First off, I just want to say happy Memorial Day to all of you. I'm filming this on Memorial Day because I just finished reading my last book that I was planning on reading in May, and I'm not going to get another book read in the next 24 hours. And I just want to say thank you for all of you that have served our country or given your lives for our country, and thank all of the families out there that have a loved one that has served. I know this day is not always a happy day for people, but thank you for your service nonetheless. So we are at the end of May, which is extremely hard for me to believe at this point, and that summer is right around the corner. So I'm just going to go over all of the books that I was able to read in May and give you my thoughts on them. Got my reading journal, and let's just get started. So the first book that I read in May was Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. This was a book that had been on my radar for a long time, and I really wanted to get it read. Finally made that happen in May, and I will say I liked this. I wasn't as crazy about it as I thought I was going to be. I really didn't know how to feel or what to feel about this book. I was getting bored at parts of this, but it was a cool book. And the storyline was good. This story, you're following multiple POVs, and they're all this kind of like ragtag team of people. Yeah, on the back it says a squire, an immortal, an assassin, an old sorceress, and a pirate's daughter. You're following this team of people that's basically trying to stop a dark magic from resurfacing that is coming about in this battle at the beginning of the book. They're on this quest and they all come together and they're trying to stop this. They bring it to the attention of the royals. The royals are like pish posh. And there is some villainous aspects of this where a villain comes in and kind of infiltrates in a way you wouldn't necessarily expect. And so that's kind of the main premise, and it's setting up a lot. And I think that's part of the reason that I was bored at parts, is that you're following all these different POVs. So it probably felt like it dragged on a little bit because you're not only building each separate character's story arc, but it's also a lot of world building and building together the plot as they all come together and it's all intertwined. And that's all good. It was well done. It's just kind of one of those things that this book wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So when I was going through it and it was kind of long and kind of a lot was going on and more complex than I thought it would be, again, not a bad thing. It's just not what I was expecting, and so I kind of was caught off guard and wasn't necessarily in the mood for that type of book. I did like it though, and I will continue, but I'll make sure that I'm in the right mood for it. I did really enjoy Demacrion. He was a really cool character. I really liked him. And eventually the villain aspect and their interactions, ties with another character did come about, and that was really interesting, and I really liked those elements. But that didn't really come into play as much until towards the very end of the book. And so I think a lot of those elements is what drew me to this book, and it kind of was in the book, but then a lot of it was just kind of pushed to the end, so maybe I will like the next one more. So I'm curious to see how they will continue it. But overall, I would say if you like high fantasy and you like a lot of character development and you like following a lot of different POVs, I think you would like this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. My next read in May was The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. This is book 2 in the Lessons of the Scholomance, first being A Deadly Education. And while I can't tell you about this book, A Deadly Education is following Elle in this magical school, and basically the kids from this world go to this magical school in theory to protect them, but they're also all 4 years learning magic and learning how to defend themselves, and you either graduate or you die because there are these Malacaria, that are basically these like magical monsters that are like all throughout the school and they're trying to kill you. And what you kind of learn throughout the series is that these monsters are always trying to kill you, especially the young ones, the children too, when they become adults and they graduate, regardless if you're in the school or not. So the idea of the school was to keep them safe, but like a lot of the safeties are failing, and so they're just kind of trapped in there anyway. And so you're following Elle's senior year, because in the last one she was a junior, and how her and all of her classmates and the kids at the school are training to graduate and going through all of these like training processes and finishing classes up, and also her growing camaraderie, I guess, with Orion. And I did really like this book. I feel like I'm in the minority because I really enjoy this series and I feel like a lot of people do not, but I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's very quirky and funny and dark and not exactly what people were expecting when they were picking it up, but I really enjoy the humor. I really enjoy Elle and how she's kind of brash and semi-unlikable, but also really funny and just kind of like, you all are idiots, I'm trying to survive here. I don't have time to be a kid kind of a thing. And like I said, I did like this book. However, I'm sorry, Naomi Novik. How can you end it like that? How dare you? How can you end it like that? Now I have to wait months. I think this comes out I think the next one comes out in October. I have to wait months to know what happens. She put a cliffhanger in the last sentence of this book, and I feel victimized. I need book 3 stat to know what happens. I am so upset. And I just can't believe she had the audacity to end the book this way. So yes, I will be continuing because I have to for my own mental health. But yes, I did like it, despite the pain I was put through at the ending cliffhanger, but I did like it. I think the only thing that kind of bugged me about this book is I felt like with Elle, there was a little bit of character inaccuracy. It didn't follow through to what you know of her as a character. And I would spoil it if I told you what I'm talking about, but basically, she throws safety out the window in one point. And granted, the things aren't attacking them for a reason, and there's been something going on about that. But there's like one like glaring thing that she just decides to do that's very dangerous in this situation. And it just, in theory, because again, the monsters aren't attacking them at this point. And it just felt like that was a little out of character for her. But I also kind of understand it. I just feel like she never would have done that inside the school. I feel like she would have waited until she was out. I don't know that for sure, but that's kind of what it felt like to me. But overall, I still really like this series, and I'm very curious to see how it wraps up in book 3. Oh, and I gave it this 3.5 stars. The next book that I read was Fireheart by Emma Hamm. And this is kind of an indie author, and well, I say ending. It says US Today best-selling author, but to me they're kind of indie, so I don't know. But I had never heard of Emma Hamm until Bookish Box and getting this book. But when I learned about this story, I was really interested in it. So basically you're following Lorelai, who is half elf. And in this book, the ruling prince thinks all magical creatures are like evil and beneath him. They're only used for amusement. And so when they're found out to be magical, they will like come for them, put them in prison, things like that, just horrible stuff. So she does all she can to hide her identity. The rebel forces that her family was a part of want her to help them overthrow the prince and take back the kingdom. So she ends up having an offer she cannot refuse to join the rebellion and enter into a bridal competition that the prince is putting on to select his future bride. And one of the biggest reasons the prince is unstoppable is because his guard is a giant dragon. And the dragon is also a man. He's a shape-shifting dragon. And the dragon race can shapeshift into human forms or dragon forms. And he's being controlled by the prince. I guess he's not a prince, he's the king. So he's being controlled by the king, and that is her biggest obstacle. So she starts to get to know the dragon in order to find like weaknesses and whatever, and they kind of develop a friendship or something more. I did really enjoy this book, and I think it was purely because of the dragon. I loved him so much, and he was so adorable, and I just loved reading about him. There's a scene that they write about, and I feel like this is rarely touched on in a lot of dragon books that I have personally read, where he is like coming home from a hard day of work, essentially, and he goes into his hoard, his dragon hoard, and there's piles and piles and piles of gold, and he kind of like goes, and like goes over to his gold and like buries himself, shuffles himself and buries himself in it, and then just like sighs in relief. And I thought that was so perfect and funny, because I rarely hear about dragon stories where they're like actually hoarding gold, and I just really appreciated how it was written, and it was really cute and really fun, and he's like a cinnamon roll tough dragon. It was so cute. I love it. And besides me loving him, the story itself was entertaining and interesting enough for me to want to keep going. It's definitely more plot than romance, at least in my opinion, which I appreciated and actually prefer. But Abraxas, the dragon, as a character is what won me over and made me really like this story, was for his perspective and just to learn more about him and everything he was going through. I am anxious to get my hands on book 2 and see where the story continues. Truly, the dragons are all I need to want to read this story, and that's all I care about. I will say that in this book, towards the beginning, there is an absolutely brutal scene And I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but if you've read this, the scene towards the beginning with the dragon eggs ripped my heart out. I could not believe it. I was so upset. But yeah, I would say even if the plot is not super interesting to you, but you like reading about dragons, I would say give it a shot because I really enjoyed reading about Abraxas. And I did give this book 4 out of 5 stars. And the next one that I read in a similar vein was Court of Dragons by Frost K. This is book 1 in the Dragon Isle War series, and I surprisingly really liked this book. It was really interesting, it was very brutal, and despite having a forced marriage trope in this book, there was no spice. And I appreciated that a lot. I really liked that about this. And like I said, the plot was kind of brutal. It was extremely heartbreaking, especially towards the beginning of the book. It really made you feel for her that she's like lost everything. It was hard. It was hard to get through at points. I really enjoyed the different aspects of the humans and the elves and their kind of like clash. I think his name is Arik. It could be Eric, but I think it's Arik. I really liked Arik as a character, and the main character actually wasn't that bad. A lot of times when I read about main characters, I'm not always the biggest fan of them because I just get irritated with them. She actually wasn't that bad. Ren, that's her name. I couldn't remember her name for some reason. Ren wasn't that bad as a character. She makes some stupid choices being a hothead, but I feel like that's kind of common in stories like this. And it didn't bother me a whole lot. It bothered me a little bit, but not as much as I've been bothered by other characters and other stupid decisions like that in other books. I'm really curious to see how this goes. The way the book ended, I was not necessarily expecting it to go that way. I thought that was a cool take on it, and curious how all the plots are going to come together. I do hope the dragons play a bigger role in book 2, but overall, really looking forward to it. And I guess I should tell you what this book is about. So basically you're following Ren and Arik. They're 2 different perspectives. And Ren, on the eve of her wedding, they are attacked by the elves, and she ends up being captured and dragged before the Elf King. He gives her 2 choices, death or marriage. She chooses marriage in the hopes that she can kind of bide her time and then take her kingdom back from them. And the story kind of goes from there. I would say that's a majority of this book though, even though it's in the summary. I thought it would be interesting, and I thought the Dragon Isles War series just sounded so great. But then I kind of started thinking about it and was like, maybe it's not going to be that great. Maybe it'll be fun, but whatever. But I actually enjoyed this way more than I thought I was going to, and I am very excited for book 2. Hopefully I can get my hands on that soon. I think it's supposed to come out in November though, and that's a long time. But yeah, very much looking forward to it. I did give this 4 out of 5 stars. This is kind of another indie author, and I would recommend picking this up if it's interesting to you at all, because I do think it was done well. The next book that I was able to read was Book of Night by Holly Black. This is Holly Black's adult fantasy debut novel. I believe it's a standalone, which I can address later, but this book was good. And that's coming from somebody that is not a fan of The Cruel Prince, and that's the only other Holly Black book I've read at this point besides this one. And I thought this book was really good. I really liked it. It was weird and interesting and dark. So in this book, you're following Charlie, who is kind of a person from the wrong side of town, if you will. She was a pickpocket and a thief, and she kind of built her life until this point being a thief and being in dangerous situations, and she's kind of now turned from that, trying to build a better life for her and her sister, and she is bartending. One night she stumbles across a murder and starts to ask questions, and then the more she digs into this murder mystery type of a situation, the more she finds out that she may have to delve into her old ways to find the truth. And the story kind of goes from there. I feel like the more blind you are going into the story, the better that is. There is this really cool aspect of it where there is shadow magic, and basically you can be a glow mist, and that just means you have magic, you have the ability to have magic. And that means that your shadow has awakened, and that's where your magic comes from. And so your shadow is kind of like, think about it as like Peter Pan. Your shadow can like move independently if it would like, and you can have like a conversation with it sometimes. It can do things that you can't. So that aspect of this book and the magic was really interesting and really cool. You can like cut people's shadows off, you can steal people's shadows. It was a lot, and I really liked the creativity of that. It was kind of interesting though, because it's set in kind of like a modern day setting, but with, so like urban fantasy, but with this magic elements. So I thought that was cool, and I really liked the murder mystery elements within the whole story. The ending was good, however, it does give you a little bit of a cliffhanger, which kind of bothers me if this is a standalone novel, because I'm like, what the heck, man? That's just like a touch unfortunate, you know? But overall, like I said, the concept was really interesting and really cool. I loved the murder mystery elements and the kind of heisty thief elements. Those were a lot of fun. The shadow magic was really neat, and I really did appreciate this book. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, and if she continued this series, I would read it, but I do think it's just a standalone. And this gives me hope for reading more of her works in the future. I would say if you haven't read this book, go ahead and pick it up and give it a shot if it's interesting to you. I thought it was really unique, and I really liked it. The next one that I read was A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is book 2 in the From Blood and Ash series, so obviously I cannot give you much about this book, but in the first book you're following Poppy. I feel like I don't even have to say this, but I will. I feel like everybody knows. You're following Poppy, and she is considered the maiden, which means that she is destined to ascend, and you don't really know what that means, and she's shrouded in these white cloths. She's not supposed to have anybody look at her face or her body. She's not supposed to form any sort of attachment. She's not supposed to experience any pleasure, have friends, like things that make you human, you know? She gets a new guard named Hawk, and he kind of shows her that maybe these things are okay for her to do and have, and maybe it doesn't mean that she is a bad person, etc. And they kind of have this like budding romance going on, and then the story goes from there. You have to really talk about this book very vaguely if you want to stay spoiler free, but I feel like you can't say a lot more than that because I wouldn't want to spoil it for anybody that hasn't read it. But anyway, so I read book 2 and I would say I liked book 1 more, and I liked book 1 more than I thought I was going to like From Blood and Ash. And this one was okay. I liked it. I didn't dislike it. But the second book felt just kind of like it dragged on a little bit. The cliffhanger from the first book, so you get a cliffhanger at the end of the first book, and it gives you a plot point and something you're going to be working towards in this book, only happens in like the last portion of this book. So it takes like the whole book basically to make this journey to another land. So it takes you the whole book to make this journey. And I think that's what kind of bothered me about it. It just felt like it was meandering on for no reason and took you a whole book to get to the next plot point, it felt like. There's a few battles sprinkled in between, a little bit of political intrigue or political issues, but mostly just character building between characters. So just like the building of the relationships in between all the characters. And I don't want to give you the wrong impression because it's not boring. Like, even though it's kind of meandering and it takes you a long time, it's not boring necessarily, and like things are going on, but it just felt a little bit like, okay, well, where is this going? If you know what I mean. And then the author will give you a little piece of information, or a cliffhanger is what it's actually called, in literally like the last sentence of the book. And I feel like she's done this with other books too. I read the Lux series from her, and I can't give you a specific example, but I feel like she's done this before, where she'll write this whole book, and then at the very last sentence, I mean the last sentence, she will drop this like cliffhanger information on you, and then the book ends. And I feel like she does that so you'll pick up the next book. But yeah, so obviously there's another cliffhanger and more information and things you're just like, what's going on? So I will continue the series because I would like to know what's going to happen. But I don't appreciate that. I don't appreciate utilizing cliffhangers like that all the time. I just so desperately hope that there are answers and a resolution before the end of this series. I really hope that's the case, or I will be sad. But I did give this book 3 out of 5 stars, and I will continue. The next book that I read was Come Tumbling Down by Seanan McGuire. This is the 5th installment in the Wayward Children series. There's only 7 out at this point, so I'm catching up. This one you are, I don't know if I can say that. I think that would be a spoiler. So in this one, you're following some characters that are in the first book. You're following their journey back to their world. I'm gonna spoil this, I know I am. But basically you're following those characters as they go back to their world, and they're trying to solve the problem that happened in the first book. But if you don't know what the Wayward Children series is, basically it's following the Home for Wayward Children, which is like a school. It's like a boarding school type thing for all of the kids that have come back from magical portal worlds like Narnia. Narnia is not like in this particular world, but that's just the best kind of example. And the kids come back and they don't know how to cope. This is following some characters we've seen before as they return to their world and they need help kind of navigating a situation in their world. So we go back to the moors and this, and that was cool. I enjoyed going back to the moors, and I still enjoy these books overall. And I liked this book more than I've liked some other ones, but I don't always appreciate in these books going back to the same characters and the same worlds. I would kind of like to see more of that and just more variety. But the next two books, I believe, are in different worlds. And one of them is a character I'm not sure I know about. One of them is a character I know about. But we're going to be seeing some new worlds, which is exciting, and I'm looking forward to those because I do like seeing all of the different worlds. And that's kind of what draws you to these books in the first place, I feel like. So I'm looking forward to seeing those. This one was okay. I liked it. I gave it 3.5 stars. I'll continue. Not a lot to say about it other than that. These are just quick little fun novellas that are enjoyable to read or listen to. If you're interested in them and you haven't tried them out, I would say go ahead and try them. They're pretty fun. And the last book that I read in May is The Gilded Cage by Lynette Noni. This is book 2 in the Prison Healer trilogy, and I really liked The Prison Healer. I liked it more than I thought I was going to, and this one I would say was also very good. I'm kind of impressed by this author at this point. So yeah, this book was really good. It did not suffer from second book syndrome, which is impressive. And if you don't know about the first book, The Prison Healer, you're following Kiva, who is the prison healer. She's in this prison called Zalendov, which is a death prison. People go in there and they never come back out. And she was taken in under unfortunate circumstances as a child and never recovered. And so she spent the next 10 years of her life becoming the prison healer after her father passes away in prison. And she is just like the nurse, the doctor. She treats all of the patients in the prison, and it's helping her kind of stay alive. But her family is a part of the rebels, and when the rebel queen comes to the prison sick, she has to figure out what's going on with her, and she gets a note from her family saying, "Keep her alive, we are coming." But the queen was sentenced to a trial of ordeal, which means she has to go through a trial of the 4 different elements, and if she survives, she's considered not guilty, but if she dies, she's guilty. But no one has ever survived, and she's sick, so Kiva volunteers to take her place in the ordeals. Book 1 was really good. It was really enjoyable, really cool concept, being in the prison like the whole time. Can't tell you what this one's about, but there's a lot more political intrigue and a lot more betrayal in this book, and it was a lot of fun to follow these characters and learn more about the other characters. It was really good. And like I said, even though it is the middle book and there's a lot of things being built upon and character development, it did not have second book syndrome. It was not boring. It was really good. And it did a really good job of building the tension. I absolutely love Calden's character. He is the best. I love him so much. And I just finished this today actually, and I really need to know how this ends. So I'm very thankful that book 3 is coming out soon and I do not have to wait long. I believe it comes out in like 2 weeks. I think it's at least June, but I believe it's 2 weeks. So I'm very glad I don't have to wait very long for book 3, but I really need to know how this ends and I really need the story wrapped up in my head because right now I'm just upset. I did guess a lot of the major twists. Even though they were probably well done, I guessed them, but even though I did guess them, it was still really enjoyable. I thought it was still done really well, and it was a lot of fun. And a lot of frustration when you're just frustrated about how characters are seeming to be blinded by family or past or things that they just need to let go of. And it can be so frustrating to watch characters make mistakes when you know that they should just move on or look into the situation from different perspectives and deeper and really see what's going on instead of just like taking things as face value. And it's so frustrating to see characters act out and stuff like that. But, you know, building that frustration, building that tension is a part of the author's job. And so it was good. And I really liked it. And I really need to know what happens. So yeah, this has been a really good series so far. And I hope it ends well. I'm a little scared because when you like the first 2 books a lot, you're afraid it's not going to end well. And you're afraid the book 3 is not going to be good. But she's done a very good job with this series so far. And I hope that she will bring it home and end it well. And if you haven't checked out this series because you've been hesitating or just however you've thought about it, I would highly recommend it. I think it's very good and very well done. And the prison aspects in the first one and then everything in this one is really good. And I think a lot of people will really enjoy this. And I think the author has just done a really excellent job. So read this series. It's really good. I did give this 4.5 stars. So those are all the books that I was able to read in May. Please comment down below and let me know the books that you read in May or which of these books you've read. As always, I would love to talk to you guys about any of these books or any books you would like to see me read in the future, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time. Stay safe and caffeinated. Bye.